Okay, let's begin. We are on page 16b2 on the Vet Pashandata. Can you see where we are? Says the Gemara, 16b2. Vet Pashandata, Vet Talfon, Vet, right? Remember that? All the line, the list of all of Haman's children. Aser bnei Haman, the 10 sons of Haman. The Gemara says, okay, now we're going to learn a little bit, not just about the Megillah itself, but also about the reading itself of this pasuk. Rav Ada bin Yafo. Rav Ada bin Yafo said, Aser bnei Haman ve'aseret. When it says the word aseret, right? If you take a look, and then it says Aser bnei Haman, vet, and then it says again aseret. Tzarich limrimrinu. It must be said b'neshima achat. So we say and then we say aseret bnei Haman. Right? We end it off. It must be said in one breath. So that's why the Hazan will pause. You know, chamesh me'ot ish. Right, like that. And then they go into the thing. And everyone, in fact, some opinions say that even though the whole Megillat Esther, you fulfill your obligation by listening to the Chazan, some opinions say that's the only part of the Megillah that you should read. Why? Because the way, when a person listens to any bracha, any tefillah, there's a halakha called Shomea Ke'oneh, that if you're listening, it's as if you answered. But Shomea Ke'oneh can't give you that you said it in one breath. So therefore some opinions say that you should read that part along in one breath in order to be able to get the one breath element. We'll see exactly why that's important in just a second.
I can't remember, but is that one of the parts that we actually do read out loud?
Sorry?
It is, right? That is one of the parts that we do read out loud.
It's not the same as those other Pesukim that there's a halakha to read out loud. But some people do it because of this reason.
Maybe Ashkenaz do it?
Maybe. But it's for the one breath. That's usually the reason why we're posek that you should do it. Okay? Says the Gemara, my ta'ama, why? What reason is there for us to have to read this in one breath out of all the Megillah? It's the Gemara to tell you, kulu v'hadi hadadi nafku nishmatayu, that they all passed away in at one time. It was like a simultaneous expiration. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Sorry. So let's just finish this, and then I want to come back to it in a minute. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan says, vav de vaizata. In the end, if there's one vav in the Megillah of the word vaizata, and it says over there, that's one of the names. Tzarich limimteche bezekifa. It has to be, mimtach usually means it needs to be stretched. Zekifa means zokef kifufim, something that stands up, okay? So the vav should be stretched bezekifa, to stand up. Kimordaya de libros. Like when the fishermen, they used to, or the people that would row the boats, that had that long pole. The only thing this reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever been on a gondola in Venice, but the guy stands on the top of the back of the boat. He's got that long pole, right, to be able.
They have in the city also.
What, with the same thing? Yeah.
Right near the case.
I'm not romantic enough, I guess. Anyway, so you have these long poles, and why did it have to have this long pole? Was the idea? Says the Gemara also to commemorate the fact that Maitama Kulu B'chad Skifa is Dakifu, that all of them were hung on this one pole. So the children of Haman are listed, right? And it starts with Vet Pashandata and ends with Vaizata. The highest one on the pole was Vaizata, okay? So they were hung, remember how tall it was? It was 50 amot high, which is 100 feet. Just to give you an inkling of what that looks like. In a pole, okay, not in a house, but in a pole. Do you remember going as a kid to Great Adventures? They used to have that diving show. Yeah, you remember that? So
taking Acapulco, the divers off the cliff, same thing.
So I don't know the cliff that been Acapulco, but in Great Adventures there's this long thing the guy's climbing for 10 minutes till he finally gets to the top. That was 100 feet.
Yeah.
So 100 foot, your average massive house in Deal is not taller than 50 feet tall. Right? 35 feet. It's nothing. 100 feet in a general building, a floor is 10 feet tall. You're talking about a 10-story building. Okay? So this must have been some sort of redwood. According to one opinion, they went to get this pole from the ruins of the Teva of Noach. Wow. They went all the way to Hare Ararat because they were looking for one beam that was that big. They had to find something that was like primordial, okay? Anyway, so so it's not all that big a deal that there's 10 people hanging on it, okay? Now, what's interesting to me is that the Megillah finds it so necessary to go into these two things. Number one, they were hung on one pole. Number two, that they all died at the same time. Who cares? So we have to read it in one breath to tell you that they died at one time. Who cares? What's the point in that? So I think that the Hidush, I think, over here is that in Purim, the challenge of Purim always is one thing, that there's not a single part of that story that could not have happened without a miracle, that could not have happened without, that could have happened without God's intervention. A guy gets angry at his wife. If he's a king, he kills her. A guy looks for another wife. If the one that he likes the most is Jewish, he marries her. Now, if some people are trying to kill him and someone saves him, he writes down, gives him an IOU. Then there's a guy who's a pretty shrewd guy. He's going to appoint him a minister. That guy's an anti-Semite. He's going to float a request. If I think that he's right, I'm going to agree to it. There's no part in the story that is an illogical thing, right? There's no part. And that was really the whole point of the Nes, of the miracle of Purim.
I mean, until you start getting into like the weeds, like when you got Hashvarosh got upset, went to his shade garden, and they were cutting down his trees.
So again, even in that, for someone to cut down a tree is not supernatural. Now, if they were angels, then supernatural, right? But from the very reading of the Megillah itself, is there anything that tells you something supernatural? Now remember, how did they die here? They were hung. That doesn't happen. People don't die simultaneously. It's not like they were shocked with a lightning bolt, where they all die at the same time. Where there's a firing squad and they have a gun to their temple and everyone says fire.
Unless they actually rig these little shelves all up.
Yeah, but
even if,
they're still all gonna, right.
How much
One's
air
gonna
did he
take
have
over
in
the
his
other.
lungs? How
no.
how was he able to kind of squeeze his neck muscle a little bit more? Right? There's so many variables.
It's still impossible, so to speak.
It's impossible.
Sure.
That the simultaneous asphyxiation, okay, of all of Haman's children at the same time illustrated that it was Hakadosh Baruch Hu's, and that's also why he made sure that it all happened in one pole. That it should be abundantly clear that, guys, you guys are fighting these wars, and all that's very natural. But I want you to know, remember, these guys who are in charge of the armies that you're in charge of, right? That's why we say Chamesh Me'ot Ish Ve'et, right? Because each one of them was in charge of a squadron of 500. They were like generals, right? Or whatever, captains.
All of the sons were?
All the sons.
I thought there were 240 sons.
There are, but these ones
guys.
are generals, and that's why we read it Chamesh Me'ot Ish Ve'et Pasher Data Ve'et Tafon. Right, so that we're connecting the 500 that die, that are killed in Shushan, and the sons. So this is one of the proofs. So because of that reason, we go to great pains to be able to, number one, list it, and number two, commemorate it by reading it like that in one breath. Okay. The last thing I wanted to point out is this idea that it's also on one pole, right? Why was it necessary for it to be on one pole? So again, if Hashem's showing you all of them are dying at the same time, so number one, you need to see it on one pole. Number two, I think there's a much deeper idea. You see, this war is, as we said many times already in Megillah, was a war really between the Jewish people and Amalek. And if you remember, we quoted the Midrash. The Midrash says that Amalek is keshevet muchan biyado shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu lepuranut. That means that they stand as the ready to be like a hitting stick that God uses. They volunteer. Anytime God needs to punish the Jewish people, Amalek as a nation volunteers to be the stick that hits the Jews. So the idea that these are individual people with individual stories and they happen to come together, Hashem was trying to show them, no, this is a continuation of that one pole, of that one stick that they are always Omed, it's again the story of Mehiyat Amalek versus the Jewish people. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Hananel ben Bar Papa, Darash Rav Shila, Ish Kfar Timrata. Rav Shila said, Kol Hashirot Kulan Nichtevot, Ariach al Gabe Levena, V'Levena al Gabe Ariach. Chutz Mishira Zu U'Melchei Kiram. Now, in order to understand this, you have to go down to the little illustration down at the bottom. On the left side, you'll see that there's two sets of letters. One set of letters is the set of letters on either side, the three aleph. Okay, that's Ariach, that's half a brick. That's a half size. Then there's the writing in the middle, which is a whole brick. But as well, if you take a look, you'll notice that there's empty space that needs to be reckoned. So the empty space above the long set of letters in the middle, okay? That, look, where does that empty space stretch from? From short half brick on one side to short half brick on the other side, right? You see that? Mm-hmm. So we have effectively three different sizes here. We have the half size of the writing on the right side. We have the full size of the writing in the middle. And then we have the space above that, which is double size, okay? And the language we're using is really just trying to give you the understanding of how big the blocks are so that we can create the look of the Shirah. So really, there's two ways to write Shirah. One way is the way you know from the Torah, right? Here and here. All empty in the middle. Okay? So you read the first, then you read that. You read, you read, you read. The other way is read, read, read. Read, 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 read. More like interleaved. That's how it is. So the Gemara says, in every shirah that you find in the Torah, so you have Ariach, the small one, the half brick, right? Al Gabe Levena is on top of a whole brick. Because look at the empty space that's underneath it, right? There's a lot of empty space underneath it. Ulevena, and the brick, the whole brick, Al Gabe Ariach is above a half of a brick, okay? So the element of writing is staggered between half bricks and whole bricks.
I'm sorry, I missed it. What's the significance of how we got here?
The Gemara is now telling you this bit that we're going to write about ve'et talfon, ve'et arvaraya, ve'et azata. How did you write it in the Megillah? So in the Megillah, it's written like this,
Right.
not like this.
Okay.
So ha'azinu hashamayim v'adabera, written like this. In the story of Az Yashir Moshe Ubenei Yisrael, they're written in this style. There's two places where we find a shirah written like this, okay? Where it's not half a brick on a whole brick. It's rather instead that on this case it's ariach al gabe ariach. It's half a brick on top of the half a brick. Ulevena, and all of the empty spaces, the wider spaces, are on top of wider spaces. You don't have half bricks on top of whole bricks. So it's all empty in the middle, and the writing is only on either side. Says the Gemara, what's the reason why we wrote specifically this shirah, which is about Haman, and the shirah about the Malchei Canaan, the kings of Canaan, that they are written in this style on the right, not on the left? The Gemara answers, Shlo tehek tekuma lemapalatan. You see, in the one in the middle, so to speak, it almost intimates that there's a connection, a step underneath you where you are to the left. Whereas on the other side, there's nothing to step on. If you're trying to escape, so to speak, your fate, there's nothing in the middle. There's just, the only thing you can do is fall, okay? So in both of these cases where we were talking about two of the most wicked enemies of the Jewish people, one Amalek, which is about where we have to destroy them, and the other is Malchei Canaan, the kings of Canaan, which also there was an obligation to destroy the ones that did not leave, the ones that would not leave Israel. So in both cases, so to speak, that there should be no way for them to stop their fall. And that's why, in a situation like this, that's how you fall. There's nothing to catch yourself on, so to speak, in the middle, okay? So it's a visual aid to this concept. The Gemara continues. The king says to Esther HaMelkah, B'Shushan HaBirah hargu HaYudim. In the city of Shushan, the Jewish people killed. An angel came and slapped him on the mouth while he was speaking. What's it talking about? So the full verse of Achashverosh needs to be seen in order to be understood. What Achashverosh says is that, look, the Jewish people, they killed 500 people in Shushan. And who knows what they did in other places, in other cities, right? And they hung the 10 sons of Haman. What did they do? What else do you want me to do? And I will give it to you. Anything else you ask me for, I'm going to do. So over here we're seeing that Achashverosh, it sounds like he changes tune mid-course, midway through the sentence. And the Gemara explains that in the beginning, he was basically saying, like, they already killed 500 people. And he was going to proceed down that line to say that the Jewish people are overstepping. You want to kill a guy? Fine. You want to hang one of Haman's sons? Fine. But they hung 10 sons, they killed 500 people, it's too much. He was going to pull back on the decree. But Malach, an angel came, Staro Aviv, and slapped him on the mouth. Just to be clear, what does it mean that an angel came and slapped him on the mouth? Did he just feel a trach on his mouth? Is that what it was? So I don't know. I imagine that it doesn't need to be that blatant. It might be, as an example, I don't know if you've ever had this before, where you start talking and all of a sudden you just like, you realize, the realization hits you that you better keep your mouth shut. Has that ever happened to you? Right? I remember once, crazy. I had two brothers, I don't know if this ever happened to you, this is a crazy one. Two brothers that were fighting over something, whatever. One of the brothers came to me and said to me, a whole thing about his brother and da-da-da-da. He was very upset. Could I speak to him? Maybe, he'll do the right thing. Anyway, I met the other brother at a thing, and I forgot which brother had called me.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, how's that thing going? He said, what thing?
Ooh.
I said,
And then you realized.
yeah.
Wow.
And you're like,
Were you supposed to speak to that brother?
No, we hadn't worked out any of the details yet.
Oh.
But I thought it was him, and I was like carrying, because the conversation was on the
So
phone.
what did he say?
She's like, what thing? And then, like, instantaneously, you have that, and you, like, lose your words, and your brain is, like, fried.
Oh, I thought you were someone.
Maybe even get a cold sweat.
I'm not sure, but I was like, I can't believe I may have just torpedoed any chance of shalom. Because now the guy knows his brother's coming, Why'd you tell the rabbi, la. So I just told him with the school, your kids. He's like, what thing with the school with the kids? I was like, it wasn't your kid that had the problem with got suspended? He goes, no. I was like, oh, thank God, Baruch Hashem. Okay. I thought, threw it like way out into left field. And I just prayed that he wouldn't realize, but in that minute of abject, like, panic, where you're just backpedaling as fast as you can, so maybe that's what, maybe that's Ba Malach Ustaro Al Piv. Maybe that's what an angel means, that the angel came. So immediately he turns around from saying, I think you may have gone too far, maybe we should pull it back a little, to saying, if you have any other requests, Esther, Ma bakashatech. He realizes as he's going, they've just killed 500 people and hung 10 sons of Haman. Maybe, maybe I better not start with them. Anyway, so he changes the direction. Midstream, like they say. Okay? Says the Gemara, and when she came in front of the king, Amar im hasefer. The king said, im hasefer, with the book, or with the letter. So let's try to understand what this means. So I want to show you the whole pasuk, if that's okay. Take a look on the side over here, in the inner column. Yeah, it's number Nun, followed by Samach. You see that? ויאמר המלך לאסתר המלכה, בשושן הבירה הרגו היהודים והבן 500 איש. They killed 500 people. ותעשה בני המן בשאר מדינות המלך, מה עשו, מה שתלך מדינת לך, מה בקשתך עוד ותעש. Whatever you want, whatever you need, it's going to be done. The next pasuk says, ובבואה לפני המלך, and when she came before the king, אמר עם הספר. He said with the book, with the letter. Well, what does that mean?
He said
Amar,
or she said?
it says Amar. Amar means he said. He said with the book, Yashuv machashavto hara'a shechashav al Yehudim al rosho. The evil thought that he had against the Jews should return, boomerang on his head. V'talu oto v'et banav al ha'etz, and they hung him and his sons on the tree. Okay? So what does Amar im hasefer mean? He said with the book. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, Amar, like Morris just pointed out.
Is it a special book that when he opened up before in his dream and it has like Mordechai is going?
First of all, I love your pshat more than the Gemara. By the way, that is a sick pshat. I love that. I never heard that before, but that's a great one. Amar Imasef, he had the talking book related.
Yeah,
That's
you know,
fantastic.
That's the one they used to teach.
Yeah. And the Sefer Zichronot. Excellent.
I was thinking that, but then it makes more sense. Whatever Haman had sealed when he
What do you mean?
gave him when he counted out the 10.
So the book, this book is not generally a talking book. Let's make this clear, right? It only happened that there's one time when the scribe Shimshi is unwilling. He's unwilling to read it. It had to read itself out, right? But you would have to include that into the chidush that the book kept on speaking.
I wasn't saying like a talking book. Actually, I was just saying the book itself. Because it feels like it's like foreshadowing.
Yeah.
fell off the shelf.
So maybe it's that it gets written in the book and there's a ramification. So the book, so to speak, speaks.
Yeah.
Even if you're saying without the miracle. I think that's good. Gemara says, Amar Amirani Ba'ale. Right? Remember, the beginning of the Pasuk says, and when she came in, who's it talking about? Her.
That's it.
So it should say, Amira. She said, says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Amira lo ye'amer bepeh, ma shekatuv b'sefer. What it means is, okay, now there's a whole machloket how to read this Gemara. It's not simple how to read this Gemara. Let me explain to you how Rashi reads it, and then I'll tell you how one of the other commentaries understands. Rashi says the words Amira lo don't belong here. They're not supposed to be here. So it's a mistake in the wording in the Gemara. It should read Ye'amer bepeh ma shekatuv b'sefer. The way Rashi understands it is that we took like a break over here, and we're in the middle of the story, right? We're telling you about what happened, and then all of a sudden we decide, we're shifting into this other bit. And how do we what do we say when we shift into the other bit? We say that whenever a person is reading the Megillah, what do they have an obligation to do? If you decide you want to read the Megillah as is, and you're not going to read it from the book itself, the halakha is you're not yotzeh. So if you've ever been to a synagogue and there's no book, and you just think, okay, big deal, I'll just sit and listen, and I'll read along. Is that okay? You have no
There's
book.
No book and you'll read along.
I follow along, like after the guy.
I thought you have to listen.
Excellent. So halakha is you need a book. But when the man is reading from a book, so that's shomea keoneh from a Megillah. But let's imagine for a minute, the guy knows it by heart. Let's say he's not reading from a book, and I'm not reading from a book. Am I yotzeh Megillah? No. It has to be from the Sefer, from the book itself. Okay? If, as an example, there's anything that I have to be yotzeh, because sometimes that'll happen. Sometimes, for whatever reason, I didn't hear the word properly, I need to make up a word. Can I make up the word just by saying it out loud? No. Because now I'm not relying on his shomea keoneh. So let's say I missed the word vayomer Haman. Everyone's making too much noise. I didn't hear it. I'm not yotzeh Megillah if I don't hear all the words. So what's the answer normally? All I do is I say vayomer Haman myself, and then I carry on with the guy. But if I don't have a book, I have not fulfilled the im hasefer. Okay, so it must be said im hasefer. That's how Rashi understands this Gemara. That the Megillah stopped for a second to say Amar. It should be said im hasefer with the book. That's how Rashi understands it. Now the commentators have a little bit of a problem because it's just highly misplaced in the narrative of the Megillah. Does this make sense? Yeah. Imagine I'm telling you, and then Haman said, "Give mishloach manot." Oh yeah, we just paused the Megillah to tell you a random halakha. You're in the middle of the story. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, is everyone? You guys with me?
Yeah.
So the Torah Temimah explains it another way. He says, "Ubeboah," when Esther came, and he spoke to her, and she spoke to him about the decree, right? Remember how the pasuk goes? Ubeboah, when she came to Melech, Amar ima sefer, he said with the letter, Yashuv machshavto hara'ah, his evil thought should be returned against him, and he should be hung, him and the children on the tree, and his kids on the tree. Says the Torah Temimah that what Esther asked him for, she said, please, I know that you wrote it down. I know that you did that. But we already had another decree that was canceled by reissuing a contrary decree. So she said, please, along with the written decree, I would like you to give also an oral decree. Say out loud to your guards, to the executioner, that what happened to Haman's evil decree is now going to be revisited back on his own head, and he and his children should be hung on the tree. Amar ima sefer. She got him to say it along with the letter.
Verbally endorse.
She got it verbally and in writing.
Interesting.
Okay? So the Torah Gemara says that's fits much better pshat with the flow of the Gemara and the flow of the narrative of the Megillah than to say that there's a random instruction in how to fulfill the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. So just last but not least, now we go back to the language of Gemara. Then you don't have to take out the words Amra lo. Now let's read the pasuk this way. And when she came in, who should it say? Amra or Amar? Amra, she said. But what did she say? She said that he should say. So we swap out the Amra lo to Amar and Asefer, and that came from what she was asking. You got it? Yeah. So the Torah Tanimah is really kind of like, now for the life of me, I don't understand why they didn't bring that. They just tell you that there's a pshat, but they don't tell you what it is. You know, and then they leave you with the pshat of Rashi, which is very difficult. It's very difficult to understand how the Megillah would have been doing that literally mid-sentence. Okay? Let's continue. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, the Divrei Shalom Ve'emet. They sent out words to the Jewish people, Divrei Shalom, words of peace ve'emet. Amar Rabbi Tachum. Rabbi Tachum says, Amrila, Amar Ravasi. And some people say it was Ravasi. We learn from here that you need etched lines. You need to scratch lines in to a Megillah. What does that mean? If you've ever noticed, you know you have a loose leaf paper, has the blue lines, right? The lined paper. Yeah. So on a Sefer Torah, you also see the same thing. There's like scratched lines, and they write letters on the line. Now, I always thought, as a child, they were doing that like for a kid in kindergarten. Like, you know, otherwise it's very hard to write straight if you don't have the lines, right? So you give me unlined paper, you see sentences that go like that, right? So I always thought that was the reason. In fact, that's not the reason. There's a halakha Moshe Sinai.
More than 3 words, or so 3 pesukim. What's something if you have the amount of Torah?
That's when you read a aliyah.
No, that it has to have the lines. If you have a certain amount.
Oh, you mean how much needs sirtut? Yeah. So we'll see in just a second what this idea. So the Gemara says that just like a Sefer Torah requires sirtut, a Megillah also has to have those etched, the scratched lines in the thickness of the parchment before you write it. Now it gets a little bit interesting over here. Now, how in the world did you get that from Divrei Shalom Ve'emet? So let me end it. Ka'amita shel Torah, like the Amita shel Torah translates literally as like the truth of a Torah. So the Gemara is making a dirasha over here. They sent Divrei Shalom. I understand that they sent words of peace to the Jews. What does it mean that they sent words of truth to the Jews? Right? They were telling the Jewish people, right? They were sending them, and you get it, a letter of peace. I get it. But what's the Divrei Shalom? What does ve'emet mean? Everybody knew what happened. So, so the answer to that is that we're using that word emet as a dirasha. That the words had to be written in a way which is emet. What's emet? Moshe emet, the Torah emet. We're talking about a style of writing that the things were written in. So the Megillah needs to be written ka'amita shel Torah. Now, this is very interesting and very, people don't necessarily know this. Not everybody agrees that a Sefer Torah needs sirtut. So what is the comparison then? The comparison is ka'amita shel Torah. There's one opinion that Amita shel Torah does not refer to the emet of Torah, i.e. a Sefer Torah. It refers to the mezuzah. The mezuzah is a portion of the Torah, and it's called emet because it has the line in it of Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad, which is the truth of all of the Torah, the unity of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Let me ask you a simple question. Again, why is this important? Why did we need to do this? You have a
To
Megillah.
give credibility to the writing, if it's written like a Torah, then people
I love
believe
that.
it more?
I love that. So one answer. The reason is because if it had the obligation of writing like a Sefer Torah, so it raises the stature of the Megillah to say that it also has like the holiness of a Torah. But in truth, does it have the holiness of a Torah? No. So what game are we playing?
I want to keep it like cohesive.
But then all the other books should also need it, and we don't have that halakha by everything. So I think that there's something here really simple, and we keep coming back to the same point. The Chachamim were terrified of one thing with Purim, and that is that people would eventually come to read it, like a story that happened, without recognizing that every Hamelech is Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So the idea of writing it like a Torah, or the idea of writing it like a mezuzah, would remind you that the same time the way you kiss the mezuzah and you think to yourself, the same way the Torah is a representation of God, the Megillah also was a representation. It wasn't court intrigue with the one minister outsmarting another minister. So we chose again to write the Megillah in this manner to be able to institute Ka'amitai Shel Torah, that it should be written in the style of the Torah itself. Okay. That was a memorial mnemonic, so to speak, to ensure that these things would never be forgotten. And I asked myself, if that's the case, don't we already have other things that we've instituted, like the saying of the sons of Haman in one breath? You know what the answer is? Yes, but what if they forgot that? So if you found an old Megillah, and we forgot everything, and Judaism crumbled, Reform won, there'd still be an old Megillah that had the lines etched that we could ask this question. We might forget why the Vav is there. We might forget. But if we could look at this story and have a built-in connection to the Torah, then someone would be able to recreate this understanding even without the halachot being followed.
That's nice.
Uma'amar Esther Kiyam. Says the Gemara. Uma'amar Esther Kiyam. And Esther's words were the thing that kept up the story of Purim. Esther Gemara. Ma'amar Esther in Divret Tzomot lo. You're telling me that it's just what Esther said that created the story of Purim? What about the Divret Tzomot? The way it works is the end of the pasuk before ends in Divret Tzomot. The beginning of the pasuk continues. Uma'amar Esther Kiyam. So what about the Divret Tzomot? You're telling me the miracle happened because of Esther, not because of the fasting and the praying and the Teshuvah of the Jewish people? Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, Divret Tzomot Uma'amar Esther Kiyam. The Vav at the beginning is what's called a Vav, a connector Vav. So whenever you have a Vav in the beginning of the sentence, what does it mean? It says and. If you find the word and in the beginning of the sentence, what do you know comes before it? Something else, right? You don't say and unless there was something before it. So Uma'amar Esther Kiyam tells you that you know what it was that created this miracle. Number one, Divret Tzomot Uma'amar Esther Kiyam. So it connects those two things in order to be able to let you know that that's how the miracle actually takes place. Kiyam Divrei HaPurim Ha'ere. Ki Mordechai Yehudi Mishneh Melech Achashverosh. Mordechai Yehudi was the second to the king of Achashverosh. Gadol Yehudim v'ratzui l'rov echav. He was great for the Jews, and he was beloved l'rov echav by most of his brothers. Ask the Gemara, l'rov echav, guy saves all the Jewish people, and only some of the people like him. The Gemara is lo l'kol echav. Some of the rabbis of the Sanhedrin, of the high court, they left him, they fell out of favor with Mordechai. Why? What's the reason? The Gemara answers that the Sivara is because once he became the viceroy, the second to the king, so he had to spend more time working on the inner workings of the government and working with Achashverosh and working with Esther. So he stopped the highest level of Torah learning that he was used to. And the rabbis of the Sanhedrin, some of the rabbis of the Sanhedrin, they kind of felt at that point, he's no longer one of us. in the same way. Now the Gemara is going to use this idea to be able to explain exactly what that means. Greater is Talmud Torah than saving lives. Why? In the beginning, when we list the list of sages, and where does Mordechai place? He's a fourth seed, okay? And in the end, at the end of the story, after everything takes place, Batar Hamisha, he's the fifth seed after the story. Gemara says, where do we know this from? Yeshua, Nehemiah, Siraya, Re'aliah, Mordechai. So if you count, you'll see how many are there. One Yeshua, Nehemiah, Siraya, Re'aliah, and then Mordechai Bilshan. These are all great sages, but they're listed as the people who went back up to Jerusalem with Zerubbabel.
At the time?
At the time, yes. Okay? Where is Mordechai Bilshan listed? He's listed in the number 5 slot. Basof Ketiv Habaim im Zerubbabel, and the ones that came with Zerubbabel, Yeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Raamya, Nechamani, Mordechai Bilshan. So you see, there's another person there in the ranks. Yeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Raamya, Nachmani, and then Mordechai Bilshan. So you see, he slipped one position from being listed after 4, i.e. 5, to being listed after 5, i.e. 6. Okay?
How come Azariah, Seraya is not on the list?
He fell out. Seraya fell out over here on the list as well.
What do they call Mordechai Bilshan?
Bilshan is the city he's from.
Oh.
Okay? So, the indication of the Gemara is Gadol Talmud Torah Yotzer Matzalat Nefashot. Greater is Talmud Torah even than saving a life. Is that true? If a person's learning Gemara, someone's on fire, so you tell them, sorry, we're in Gemara Megilla class. We're almost done. 2 minutes.
Save one life, you save a whole world.
It's not the halakha. So what does the Gemara mean? This is interesting. The Chachamim had no problem with Mordechai doing what he did until he saved the Jewish nation. No problem. But now he took a future position. The Jews are good. We're good. So come back now. We need you leading the people, not leading the government. Mordechai said, well, you understand who Achashverosh is. You understand then that if I'm not here, all this happens again.
I gotta be here.
So the idea of a proactive is not the same as a reactive. He was, yes, he was. But in other words, he was less engaged. My point always is, he's still number 6. Right?
6 is still pretty good.
6 is still pretty good.
Yeah, but now you're slipping after you did all this. It's like, oh wow, it's like,
But he was never even number 1. That's
He's
how they
slipping
communicate.
in
He
the
was
level,
fifth
in his
seed
level
out
of
of
Torah learning. That's the point. As a legal judge, that's based on your Torah knowledge. Okay? So I always love this, by the way, because this is a perfect example with regards to the halachot of Shabbat as well. In Shabbat, we find an exact replica of this idea. Let's say, as an example, there's a doctor who gets a phone call on Shabbat, come into the office, I'm going to save a life. Mutar or asur to break Shabbat? 100%, not even a question. Here, may I ask you a question. Let's say I'm not a doctor. Let's say I work in R&D on a medicine, and I know that with enough hours in R&D, I'm going to produce a medicine. Now, if I work Shabbats, I will get that cure 1/7 faster. Simple math. Every day, people are dying from this disease that I'm going to make a medicine for. I know I'm going to make it. It's just a matter of time.
But you may not, if you believe in Hashem.
Let's say, as an example, it's a clear path to the goal.
It's not allowed.
Why not?
It's not immediate.
Oh, you see, it's not like there's a life right here that I'm saving right now. It's a proactive
That happened.
versus reactive.
That was a real story.
It happens all the time.
There was a guy who bought, someone owed him money, and he bought a big, pharmaceutical R&D, whatever.
Yeah.
And he went to him, and he's like, it's open 7 days a week. What do? I don't want to slow down, and for a while, this and that. He said, you have to close it on Shabbat. I think that's how the story went.
Now, do we believe as Jews that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make sure that you don't lose out because you close on Shabbat? We do believe that. But that's not the point. The point is that one would be allowed, you would have thought that you would be allowed because it's not only one Pikuach Nefesh, it's Pikuach Nefesh of thousands.
Global.
And the answer to that is, that's true. But the only time we make Pikuach Nefesh, it's like a case-by-case basis. So you have a case here in front of you, this is Pikuach Nefesh, break Shabbat for this. Same thing that the Chachamim were telling Mordechai over here. Let's just wrap this up. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Item Rabbi Shmuel ben Marta. The Gemara says, Gadol Talmud Torah Yotem Binyan Ben HaMikdash. Same thing. Talmud Torah trumps the building of the Beit HaMikdash. Of course, much Baruch ben Neriah Kayam. When Baruch ben Neriah was alive, he was the rabbi of Ezra. Lo hinicho Ezra va'ala. Ezra did not leave the Galut and go up to Eretz Israel. How do we know that? Because remember, in the first list, like you pointed out, Seraiah drops out of the list. But who else gets on the list? Ezariah, which is Ezra. So Ezra does not go up to build the Beit HaMikdash early. You know why? His rabbi is still alive. There's more to learn from my rabbi. What do you mean? Ezra is the one who rebuilds the Beit HaMikdash. The answer is that's true. But Talmud Torah is greater than Binyan Beit HaMikdash. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel Marta. Rabbi, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel, the son of Marta. Gadol Talmud Torah yoter mikibud avim. Greater is Talmud Torah, much more than honoring your parents. Shekolotav shanim shehaya Yaakov in Bet Ve'ever. When Yaakov was studying in the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever, lo ne'enash. Remember, how long does Yaakov spend away from his father? Everybody knows 22 years, and that's why Yosef is away from him for 22 years. However, on the way to go to Paran, he stops in the yeshiva and learns for 14 years. He's not punished for the 14 years that he spends away from his parents. You don't find that he's away from Yosef for 36 years. It's only 22. Because the years he was spending learning Torah, there's no claim against him on Kibud Avayim. Because why? And I always say this, why not? Because the greatest Kibud Avayim, the greatest thing you can give your parents is to do Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. They don't know it yet. Right now they think it would be much nicer if you came over for a barbecue. But after 120, they'll realize that every time that you weren't able to come because you were studying Torah is paying dividends for them in the Olam HaEmet in a way that they can never begin to imagine. Okay? And therefore, he's not punished for that time. The Amar said, why are the years of Ishmael counted? We don't really usually count the years of someone unless they're a perfect tzaddik. And even if Ishmael did teshuvah, he's not considered a perfect tzaddik. So why do we number his years? Because when we count the years of Ishmael, we're able to align those with the years of Yaakov and count through Yishmael's years, the years of Yaakov. These are the years of Chai Yishmael. Not 100 years, 30 years, and 7 years. And therefore, what do? We take the calculation of Yishmael and we use it to be able to account for the times of the years of Yaakov. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen. Amen.